thank you again for being here. Thank you again for being willing to participate in this. This will be active. And
Oh, whoa, I'm at it.
I know, yes, just you can't participate. And I will once again simply turn it over to Rebecca.
Okay. So, I spent a long time up here talking before my work is done. You guys have to work now. So this is a blended learning workshop, subtitled, or not subtitled, Problem Solving in the Emerging Digital Ecosystem. So I sent the list of people that had signed up for the workshop. I sent you an invite to a Google Docs folder, Google folder. You should have that in your email. If by chance you didn't register for the workshop, once we get into the first exercise, come tell me your email and I'll send you the invite. In theory, fingers crossed, you can also click on this link and get to it, and again, you would need to be logged into Google. So this is a bit.ly link to London Moravian, which I hope would be distinct enough that you can find it. So that's the folder where the stuff is that we're going to do, or just go to your email, and again, if you don't get invited on your Moravian email, you don't have a Moravian email yet? Okay, then you'll just come tell me what email you need me to send it to, and I'll do that in a couple minutes. So here's what we're going to do in the workshop. We're going to learn about and try some approaches to course design or blended learning. You're going to develop a blended learning assignment for the emerging digital ecosystem. We're going to develop a scaffolded curriculum for blended learning in the emerging digital ecosystem. That's sort of outcome of the talk I gave earlier, right? Scaffolded curriculum. And then also, by going through this workshop together, you're going to develop a learning community for blended learning. So, does anybody have a definition for blended learning?
Besides you.
Besides me, right. What do you think it is? In the very back, yes.
I think it's a combination of the traditional face-to-face teaching with an online system that is hybrid.
Yeah, hybrid is another word that often gets used. So yeah, that's a very basic definition. This is actually a definition, I think it's from Bryn Mawr's Blended Learning Project. We define blended learning as the strategic incorporation of online and face-to-face course elements in a single course to enhance student learning. I tend to be more expansive, because I am with so many things, in my definition. I mean, yeah, face-to-face and online, but I mean, I think if you think about how you teach, you've been blending for a long time. You blended out of coursework, out of the classroom work, within classroom work. You send students out to do community engaged learning. So there's all kinds of things that can get blended in. And it can, the most basic definition is blending in sort of face-to-face and online. But I think you can think of it, again, as blended in the whole ecosystem. So what we're going to really work on today is how do you blend the whole ecosystem in? One approach to thinking about how to do that, and this is something we've actually been doing at St. Edward's where I work, is the idea that we could leapfrog, right? So if we're going to blend face-to-face and online, right, there are people out there who've been doing online learning for quite a while now. And while some of their first attempts may not be for our liking, they've been getting better at it. And so one thing you could think about is how you could leapfrog. So how you can take what they've learned about online learning, take the parts that work for you, and blend that into your own instruction. And if you're interested in following up with that, a book that I've read recently and I'm now reading with my team of instructional technologists is a piece called Minds Online, Teaching Effectively with Technology. It's actually ostensibly about online teaching and learning. It's done by a psychologist. And what I really like about it is she kind of goes through what are the different psychological theories about learning. What do we know about learning now? So it's learning science, and then what implications does that have for how you would design your course, whether that's online or face-to-face or hybrid. Another place where you can kind of go through what are the best practices for teaching online and blended is a project called Quality Matters. Is anyone familiar with Quality Matters? This is one person, yeah? Okay, so this comes out of the University of Maryland. It's a faculty-driven, peer process. They've created a rubric for good online teaching and learning. And you take the rubric, you make sure your course fits the rubric. It's a sort of guidelines. And then there is a peer review committee that reviews, well, you write up, here's how I think my course fits the rubric, and then they'll come through and review it as well. And again, these are not a straitjacket guidelines. This is best practice. They're based in research and experience. So those are two places I just sort of give you as references. If you want to think about, like, you know, instead of having to figure it out, all of it on your own, those are some places to start. Again, look for inspiration, take what works for you, and leave the rest. And I will share all of these slides on that folder. Okay, so if you're not getting the reference down, don't worry. I share everything later. This is another sort of roundup of some of the things you could learn from online learning. This is a slide courtesy of my friend Jen Edler. She was on the planning group, Jim's planning group with me, and so she took her 400-person Roman culture class and flipped it. So that was her first blend. The flipped classroom was one way of blending. So she recorded a lot of lectures, and then she focused her in-class time around doing ethics case studies. So part of the point of doing the blended was shifting that sort of content delivery out and engaging her students in more interactive, active learning in the classroom. She has now taken that same class, and she wrote about this for the Chronicle of Higher Education. I'll give you the reference later. She's taken the same class, and she's designed it as an online course that's being taught by someone else. So some of her tips for what are some other things you have to think about when you're teaching online that also are just good pedagogy. When she's doing this big class, you have to think about how you're structuring course content. Is it just delivery? Are you just pushing a bunch of stuff? Or is it elucidation? Are you doing more Socratic methods? So you can do a video. You don't want to just video yourself talking for an hour, because I don't want to sit through that. But you know, when she did these videos, smaller chunks, and then stopping, asking questions that her students would have to respond to. So even when you're thinking of sort of videos to push content, there are better and worse ways to do that. So I know that we've had a lot of faculty at our school who are interested in, you know, I can't cover all my content in class, I'll just record it all, it'll be great. I'm like, yeah, your students aren't gonna watch them. So, you know, how can they actually be learning? Another principle she talks a lot about is multimedia, so integrating graphics, audio, video, text, simulations. I think simulations are a really great opportunity for blending because it gives students a chance to experience what they're learning, whatever it is they're studying. So it's a chance to apply, right? To have a semi-authentic experience. Another one of the best practices coming out of the online world is low-stakes frequent assessment. And this is something that technology can help you do because you can do automated feedback. So we've had a lot of people who are concerned of, well, you know, if I'm teaching online and they're doing these tests, you know, they're doing these assignments, what if they cheat? They're not in front of me, I don't know. But in fact, one of the strategies to deal with that is don't make these big high-stakes assignments. Break it up. If you think about it, we do this for, you know, when we're teaching writing as a process. You give them grades for little pieces of the writing, the big paper they're doing, or the big project that they're doing. You break it up so that it's not so high stakes, and that sort of paces us out. You know, and intellectually we know this, right? You shouldn't wait till the last minute and make the big push on the big project. You should do a little bit of work over time, and that's better. And with technology, you can actually set it up to help them break up the material. She does some summative assessment. A lot of the grading that she does, again, this is a really big class, so a lot of it is you can grade written work, but you have to figure out ways to deal with all of the material that's coming in. So if you're having more stuff done outside of class, how are you going to handle that workload? One way to do it is have automated feedback. Another way to handle that is have students interact and give feedback to each other. So there's lots of strategies that people in the online world have figured out, okay, here's how we're going to handle. We're engaging them in doing more work outside of class, but we have to make that realistic for us, for our own workload. She structures it with frequent deadlines for the graded work, again, so that they constantly keep working and moving along, even though they're not seeing each other. Our students, when we teach face-to-face, always have class to get ready for. You know, they know, okay, I'm going to be ready for class this week, and so I will, you know, do the work that I need to do. But when they're not meeting for class every week, then sometimes they let that work go. And we have a few faculty at St. Edward's who are teaching blended, and that's one of the things they figured out. They're like, oh, I do this with graduate students, and it works fine, but my undergrads have no idea how to work this way. So one of the things you actually have to think about is giving them a structure that basically makes them do what we know they should be doing, which is working all along, and then ensuring that structure with grading, and then also helping your students understand this is the amount of work this class takes. Really good online teachers are much more transparent. They tell your students. I was looking at the syllabus of one of our new faculty last week, and his unit actually says, this week you can expect to spend this much time doing this, and this much time doing this. Now this is a rule of thumb, but at least it communicates to the students, these are my expectations. Sometimes I think our face-to-face students could benefit from having those very clear expectations so that, I'm giving you this assignment and I expect you to be putting this much time in on it. But in the online setting, that's all the more important. So this is just kind of a roundup of some of the lessons that you could get from online teaching and learning that I think could benefit us face-to-face as well.
I was just wondering if you could say a little bit more about the first one. If I understood you correctly, you were talking about using the Socratic method within an online format?
Yeah, so you can do it in such a way, when Jen recorded these videos, one of the things she did is, it's her talking torso, PowerPoint slides, and she actually built that in. She would talk for a little bit, and then she would ask a question and expect the students to be thinking about answering it for themselves. You can also do that by a little mini video and then discussion forum. So they actually do have to answer. So it's the Socratic method, but you sort of stretch out the timeline.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And again, I bring this up because I think we have this sort of idea from the MOOC world of that it's just sort of canned content delivery, but you can think about doing the Socratic method. You just have to adapt it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do today is engage in a little bit of backwards design. You guys familiar with backwards design? One of the things, again, we have several faculty going through, we have an MBA program which we're moving into a low residency format because Austin is number 4 for gridlock in the country, and people don't want to drive to campus. And they're in a part-time MBA. And our faculty who are redesigning this MBA are actually working with an external instructional design firm. And one of the really interesting insights is, if you think about your experience in graduate school, for the bulk of my graduate career, I didn't get any instruction on how to teach or how to design a course. So you design courses based on the courses you took. This is how you teach Latin. I'll construct it the way I learned Latin. And then my last 2 years, I was a fellow, a Timicles fellow for the teaching of writing. And that is where I first learned how to design a course, which is not to say that it was perfect, but it was the first, as a grad student, the first exposure I got to it. So what's been interesting for faculty working with this external instructional design firm is that they are going through a backwards design, rigorous process. If you're interested in this way of designing teaching and learning, there's a book called Understanding by Design by Wiggins and McTeague. There's also, Mark Sample has a nice piece on it called Planning a Class with Backwards Design and Prop Hacker. But the way you do this is you basically figure out what are your desired results. What do we call those? Yes. What are your outcomes? Then you figure out, how will I know I have met them? What's your acceptable evidence? Then, so what's your assessment going to be? And then, based on that, you kind of plan your learning experiences. So, you guys familiar? Does this sound familiar now? You've designed things this way. You may not have realized this is what you were doing. And again, in the folder I gave you sort of lots of examples. So, a really quick example. This is an example from Kelly Green at St. Edward's University. She wanted to create a blended course, and she did it as a problem she was having in a course on counseling and guidance. Her goal was to increase understanding of counseling theories. Her old method was, you'll read about counseling theories, you'll come into class, and we'll discuss them, and then you'll do some homework where you apply them. But she found she wasn't getting the outcomes she wanted. So her assessment was they would apply the counseling theories, but they weren't really doing that as well as she thought. So she shifted to a blended strategy. Again, her evidence was that you would see it in case studies. So she added what she called warm-up exercises, which is basically you read about the counseling theories and then you do quizzes to see where you understand or not. So that when students came into class, she could look over the results of those quizzes, which were done in our learning management system, Blackboard. She could look over the results and really quickly tell, okay, they got this, they didn't get this, I'm going to cover this topic a little bit more in class, work through it, and then as a class together, they would do what it is she wanted them to do, which is apply whatever the counseling theory was to a case study. Their case study was the character of Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. So they would counsel him. Evidently, he has lots of problems. And they would do this together so that, again, her students were understanding this is what it means to apply this, and then they could each pick their own fictional character, and they would do it again for homework. To grade that homework, she had the students peer reviewing each other, and what she actually ends up grading is their peer review. So she sort of, again, put more work into it. Now, when she first taught this class, after she had done this redesign, she did encounter student resistance. She was making them work harder. And again, she had to come up with strategies of getting them used to that idea that you're going to be doing more work. But this is an example of what one version of a blended course could look like. This is a face-to-face class, but what she's done is shift what she does face-to-face so that she's able to work with students where they need the help in actually applying the theory instead of, understanding and remembering. So her old version, in class, they were working on understanding and remembering, and then they were having to apply on their own. Now, they apply when they're in class, and then they practice applying again out of class, and then the peer review piece is actually analyzing and evaluating. So she's able to move the class up Bloom's taxonomy. So again, this is just a really quick example of what you could be doing if you were thinking blended. But this is just one version of blended. As I said, I have a very expansive definition. So all of those examples of learning in the digital ecosystem, I think if you blend in approaches like that, you were doing blended learning. I mean, it could be all kinds of learning. What do you need from the online world? I think that where people have been using online and digital tools, they've learned some lessons on how to do that well. So that's something to look at. One resource that you can also look at is a thing called BlendKit. This was a toolkit developed at the University of Central Florida. And it actually helps you step through how to create an ideal learning plan. So then again, this is just another reference for you to look at. I will give you one caveat. Their approach to blended learning is actually based on a limitation of classroom space. So for them, blended learning really is, we don't have enough classrooms, so part of the class has to be done online. And it's very sort of strictly focused that way. But one of the really interesting lessons I think they've learned is how to blend and how to pay attention to your blend. So one really important insight is what you do outside of class has to connect to what you're doing in class, which has to connect with what you're doing outside of class. And that's what this diagram is attempting to show, that there's a feedback loop. You can't just have these separate things going on. And it can't be the same thing, right? Students have to see that we are moving forward. If I'm doing the same thing in class and out of class, I'm like, why am I having to repeat this? So they need some sense of where this is going. To give you one example of how I did that, I mentioned in the last talk an assignment I did playing with Voyant, which was that text analysis tool. So for me, when I designed that assignment, this is how I was thinking around the blend. So outside of class, they were given homework, basically. Go play with Voyant. I gave them some directions, and that whole assignment is on the blog if you want to kind of see how it's set up. So go play with this, and then they had online discussion due once a week, and Canvas was the learning management system we were using. And in that discussion, they had to reflect on what they did. So share the results, and then reflect on it. So I gave them some reflection questions. In class, we had another classroom discussion. So they'd done kind of reflection in their online discussion and a little bit of analysis. in class, I had read through all their online discussions, and we actually had another discussion, but it didn't repeat what they'd done online. I was able to go up to one higher level and really synthesize, here are the themes I saw all across your online discussion. Based on that theme, let's take our thinking a little bit further. So that's what I mean by when you're blending, it can't just be separate things. You need to validate, look, you did work outside of class, let's bring it into class. But you can't just rehash it, you need to take it further and help your students see that you are taking it further. Also need to think about designing integration, right? So again, you have your learning goal, that's the really big thing. You achieve your learning goal with whatever your learning strategy is, and only after you thought of those things do you get to the technology, right? And you look at what the affordances of the technology is. That is, what's it good at, right? Doorknobs are good at turning. And so what is technology good at? Mobile devices are good at being taken anywhere and gathering data, for example. But when you're doing that design, you don't start with I want to use an iPad in my class. That's the wrong question to ask. You figure out what it is you want to do, and then you kind of figure out, okay, is there a technology that would help me do that? We can go there. So what you need to do then for blended learning, generally, is figure out what is your blend? What do you want to blend in? There's a wide range of things you can think about. One way, and you guys are going to do this in a couple minutes, so really start thinking about this. One way you might think about it is, what do you have them do for homework? Is there a way to do that digitally? Are you doing that already, maybe? What are the practices and methods of your disciplines? If you think about what the sort of capstone signature work of your discipline is, how would you help students get there? What kind of skills do they need to get in place first? And that might be something that you could get them to practice in a blended way. So these are some of mine, right? Reading, writing, reviewing, practicing, analyzing, annotation. I love annotation. Creating. Another thing you might think about blended in is engaging them in any of these high impact practices. There's a list from AAC and U. Other blend options, a really common one is threaded discussion or blogs, so having them do some work outside of class like that. Social annotation, some kind of digital project work that they could be doing iteratively. So slowly thinking how you're integrating that. You could have online elements of self-study. That's not really common, flipping the classroom, let's wait, make them watch videos outside of class. But again, construct those well. Could be modules with built-in feedback. For me, teaching Latin, I want all the drill and kill out of class, right? They got to memorize paradigms. A computer that can give automated feedback is so much better than me listening to them do paradigms in class, or making them do quizzes on paradigms in class. I used to for vocabulary. Here's the vocabulary you have to learn. Here's your online vocabulary quiz. You do it as many times as you want, as long as you get an A, or as long as you get 100%. For the one student I had who was dyslexic, I let her stop when she felt like it. So she would usually get up to 93. But yeah, there's a lot of things that computers are really good at. That automated feedback for sort of the basic, just memorizing stuff, good at that. Let's do that blended so that you can spend time on the things you're really good at, like mentored learning, mentoring them learning how to deal with unstructured information and problems. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do right now is turn to the Google folder and spend some time doing exercise 1. And again, as I said, I will, if you don't have access to the Google folder, come up and see me and I'll try to get you access. And I'm going to flip over to it. So it's a folder called Digital Ecosystem and Blended Learning. And the exercise I'd like you to do, spend a little bit of time on, is exercise 1, which is build a blended learning assignment. So this is us practicing. So on your own, just take a little bit of time, about 10 minutes, and again, you can repeat this.
We don't have the option to download or open it in Google Docs. We could view it.
Okay, let me just go in and check, and I'll fix the sharing settings, okay? So anyway, but you can read through the directions there. What I really want you to do is take a first stab at a blended learning assignment. Or maybe you have one already, but I'll let you kind of read through those directions, and I will also work on fixing the directions for you right now. So this will be instead of 20 minutes, because again, we started a little bit late, it might take less time. So I might give you like 10 minutes to work on this. So start working individually, and later you'll get to work in groups, and I will also work on my sharing settings.
You can't pop this out when people start typing, it'll mess up, I think it'll mess up the original.
Okay, I'm going to just mute video for a second.
Actually, should we just...
You can just pop out and let's then make changes.
Oh, pop out?
Yeah, so if there's an error, so if you just do that, then it creates a separate.
Oh, cool, thank you.
It looks like everybody has permissions to edit this,
So
but
we can
you
pop
need to
out.
be logged
You
in.
just have to pop out.
Pop out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if they open it in Drive instead of, like, if you open it in, if you do the thing that says open in Drive, then I think people are getting it.
It's easy if you
So
just
if you
pop
go
out.
to your
Yeah, pop
Google
out. If you
Drive
open
and
it,
go
yeah,
to the
pop
shared
out.
with me,
Yeah.
Thanks, Aqua.
you should be able to find this, and then you can add it to your own Google Drive and work on it.
Yeah.
So, and if anybody needs to be added, please come up and see me, and I'll be happy to add you or invite you. Yeah, so what you need to do, you can do this, the directions are in here, you can do this wherever you want. You can make a document and put it in this folder to share with everybody, but you don't have to,
It's
okay?
what I'm doing is I'm making a copy of it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, so you don't, this was just a convenient way to share the directions.
So I have it set up for double tap. If you right click.
And again, if you're in Google Drive, if you go to shared with me right here,
No, just
you should see this as something that you can then add to Drive. And I'd be happy to kind of circulate and help people. Is everybody good? Anyone need help? Yes.
So if you, I don't know what your shortcuts. No. Can I just try something? Because you're set up. I have my this.
Here, I tell you what, I'll go all the way back to
Yeah, I'm not sure where.
fresh.
No, you, I think deleted the.
You took away my access.
Hey
Did you take
Rebecca,
away your access as well?
I think someone accidentally deleted exercise one from the
Right.
file.
working there.
Oh, right, okay.
Do you want me here, want me to send it to you?
Somebody moved it out of the folder.
That must have been you.
I made a copy. I had made a
I saw maybe
copy, so
copy,
I.
but-
Can you just add that copy back in?
Yeah, so copy of exercise one, you should now see it. If you're right there.
Okay, thank you. So you fixed it. See, that's self-direction and ADAS.
It's telling me to get permission.
Okay, what you need to do is go back here. And you need to add the folder to your drive.
No, so all to download it, so just pause for a second.
So yeah, your step is you get to it, add the whole folder to Drive, and then open in Drive. And that should be it.
Not to get too medic, can my assignment be how to deal with a shared document not screwed up the entire
Yes, it totally can be that.
You can also
This is, helps you have empathy with your students, right?
download it. I'm going through the file menu, download as Microsoft Word document. Since you don't like having the Harry Potter,
If I write in this.
now you have it as a Word document.
Oh, if I'm writing and you're writing, wouldn't it?
I copied and pasted into a new document. I'm not online with any of this.
So copy and paste.
Because I,
That's what I do.
That's what I did too.
I was distracted by the fact that it's going to find what
Do you create a new, oh, just like on a Microsoft Word, okay.
Notes in Word.
Got it,
and
right.
so I
An
just simply
unstructured
went down
problem?
my second page and
Got it,
I
okay.
posted,
That's what I was
and it's
thinking.
working.
I
Yeah.
think she's finding it as a problem where you're not told how to get to the solution. You have to figure out what questions to ask and then where you're going to. Go up to there. I always have mine on my screen. Remember somebody showed that to me when I was a grad student, and I was like, ew, why would I want to make it so big? And now I can't read anything small. I think it's the difference between, say, a very structured problem with a set of steps about how you're going to solve it versus, here's a problem. You figure out how you're going to set up steps to solve it.
I can't wrap my head around it. I used to think that was so much of what I was huge. It's like beforehand, like in a piece of
So usually
I mean, for mine, for example, I was thinking, one of the things I want to teach my students is not just how to read to their text, but if they come across a text or source related to Latin America, how do they connect it in with their existing knowledge frameworks to start to build in questions of context so that they can read it well. Because right now, I can give them an essay and they might have the very basic bibliographic information about something else. Well, they should know that something written from a Cuban author in 1891, they should be able to figure some basic things out about the situation. But right now, they don't do that unless I explain it to them. And I want them to learn that that's something they can figure out. So that's one thing that I'm literally right now working on in the class. So I was like, okay, guys, well, was Cuba independent yet? No, it wasn't, like as much as the rest of Latin America. Oh, yeah. How does that affect his perspective on nationhood and independence?
Okay. So you're in that. And now I just crashed it.
Joe was typing
Yeah.
No, he's playing Candy Crush.
Yes. Lady
Work together.
We are children of the 80s, Carol.
Okay. Because again, you can do this on paper if you want to. You don't have to do this digitally.
I'm so sorry. But it looks like the
And since I'm only giving you a little bit of time, I'm not expecting masterpieces, okay? Very good. Question? Very clear. Ask something.
So what I'm doing is working from first year summer, which is
Right.
Okay, so I'm not the only one.
going to do What shows where do you go to get the files? Where's the hospital?
Not too well, but
Are the most cost-effective ways? And when I go to the box office and pay or, you know, all those good talks about different things. But then you
not as good as answers.
don't have figures. So that's, to me, that was an assignment that worked because it was real world. So it was getting like, do, so.
in and out of contact.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I'm going too big.
I always say become small or big, and then you break it down. However it works.
Well, it could be a levels of analysis exercise, so you have these different scales of representation of the community. You know, to tell two different stories based on that micro level and the macro level.
So everybody have something? How are we doing so far?
Give me an example of a structured problem, so I know what an unstructured problem is.
Write me a paper about fate and Oedipus.
That's a structured problem.
Something that's been answered before. And unstructured might be, I don't know. Again, something where like you don't know what, as an instructor, you don't necessarily know the answer.
Oh.
Structured problem is a known problem. I know what it is. No, it's true. Unstructured is.
What if it's like identifying passages, and if they misidentify but they have a good reason for it, that's an acceptable answer?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting them to generate new knowledge.
Because they think when they have to identify quotations from Shakespeare that they have to memorize everything.
What if it's identifying references to Shakespeare in pop culture?
Concertos or whatever it is.
I mean, it's
And do
finding
something with it.
yeah,
They have
finding
to
them
find
and then
it.
analyzing what it is. You know, for me in classical studies is interpreting Disney's Hercules movie. What does that say? You know, how does what do we know about what we know about mythology? How does that help us understand what that movie's about? So it's taking learning you're doing in your
Okay,
discipline
let me
and applying
back up a
it.
minute. What's something
Somewhere to transfer,
basic
maybe?
that they have to
They've been
listen
talking
for,
about
that they could go online and they
in
could
class,
find
and I don't know,
two
they've been
different
finding
versions of it and listen.
updated versions of Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah.
Like a rave with DJs, you know, or something that they do with drunken Shakespeare and everything. And I go, yeah, that's great. And they go, well, how's that Shakespeare?
And that's a great question. And
No,
go
I'm
to
not
that.
ready for that
So
yet.
How is that Shakespeare? That's what
Oh, it's so
Shakespeare.
obvious, but they don't know how to see it. So it's for them to see where Shakespeare's ideas are in pop culture.
Yeah, that's a great unstructured problem.
I mean, that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Okay, I'm going to give you 2 more minutes, and then we're going to change activities. I know this isn't much time to get. It's just our first try.
Started knowing that they're not.
I'm here.
Like, looking at a list of results, it's just going to be very big.
Right. Right. So I'm just wondering how you can see I don't have enough disciplinary content knowledge.
And the problem is they no disciplinary content.
Right. You're building that.
The whole 4 years is about.
So I want you to find a Beethoven piece and listen for these 3 things and blog about it so that they're talking to one another about the different Beethoven pieces they've selected and what they've heard. And of course, there will be nuggets in that for you then to talk about together. But to me, that didn't meet the definition there of instructor because you know the pieces, you know what they're going to find. But you're not doing it for them, and you don't know which ones they're going to pick or which orchestras will have played it. I would be intrigued in an educational context to pick a piece of music and hear it performed by an amateur regional orchestra, a world-class symphony. And what differences? I mean, the sheet music is the same, but what are the differences you hear in those renditions of how it's played?
So it's not formal, the flow of it is there.
Yeah. Someone should actually send my JC skills to the organization and send me to.
Yeah.
All right, question number one.
Okay.
Like, why did why did they areas?
Yeah.
Because they weren't capable of doing their food fast.
I mean, it's coming back to what you're saying. And what's hard about the teaching is we're taking it backwards. We're trying to force technology as opposed to really saying, what are the big questions?
Maybe that's the music is not completely unapplied. That's all nuts and bolts.
Have trouble getting them to together.
Let me think about it.
Okay, we're gonna move right along now. Hopefully everybody has something. So my next exercise, also known as exercise 2, requires agency and self-direction. You need to put yourself in groups by discipline. If you don't have someone else from your department or discipline here, someone in a related department or discipline, if you don't have that, then just think, hey, you're building general education. So form groups. And I'm not going to form them. You have to self-organize. Participatory culture.
We're doing all this extra work. That's not what
Stay dry out there.
I did a writing. I'm sorry.
I've given up.
This is a workshop that we
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Showing it.
You somebody? Okay, has everybody gotten groups yet? And these groups can be as big or as small as you want. You can have more than one group. You went to social science.
Oh, is that different places?
Everybody find a group. They were moving into exercise. Everybody find a group of some sort. I will assign you to it if you want me to.
I have a way of getting, part blended.
Okay, so really quickly, your next assignment in your group. So how many groups do we have? Can you tell us who you are real quick? So this group over here is what? Sciences are over here. Languages. Basically Hispanic studies. Right over here next to you.
Just two of us, music.
Music.
Two in English, writing.
English writing. Okay. Over here. History. Religion. Right here. Religion. English writing. All of you. Okay, so those are the groups. Your assignment is to take the assignments that you developed and hook them together somehow. Now, I realize that there might be some gaps. You should fill those in or tell us where they are gaps. But what I'm really wanting you to think about is, my argument this morning was that students need to experience this repeatedly. So if you think about the skills they need to be developing, how can you hook your assignments together to basically scaffold that kind of learning across the curriculum? So come up with a scaffolded set of assignments. Again, I'm expecting like a list or something like that, right? Bulleted list. And then you can point out this, hopefully thinking about how they integrate will also help you see gaps. So you need to tell each other what your assignments are and then think about how you would fit those together. And then I actually have an outcome for you. Each of your group should make a slide that kind of shows the scaffolding. You know, should show me beginning, intermediate, advanced. Again, I know this is going to be very brief, very schematic, but one slide that shows the solution that you can share with everybody in here, which is the last thing we're going to do. So go to it. And I'm happy to come over if you have questions. Feel free to call me over.
Making decisions about the timeline.
So what I was thinking of is that, you know,
Maybe
Yeah, take away the food stuff.
you know, in my case,
But the thing is, you just do change your pedagogy and keep it exciting and interesting. You are a child of the 60s. Let it and sometimes it happens. Plan anyway. Yes. Right. Good But I'm thinking for me in this assignment, what would be interesting in Shakespeare context would be whatever play it is, you know, and you've already given it. Go into the world and nature. But it might be, okay, let's take the to be or not to be soliloquy and find 3 different actors to live in it. And you don't know what 3 you're going to pick. Chances are you'll have seen 2 of the 3, but maybe they'll pick some high school kid who's but to me, that would be an exciting assignment. What do they find? What choices do they notice? Yes, yes.
And just say, you're and we'll just set up and we won't this one will college. We won't actually We're ignoring your assignment. And we're just
as long as you're getting something out of it.
No, because we were talking about in a Shakespearean context. Actually, we're saying, okay, the to be or not to be soliloquy, finding 3 different renditions online, comparing and contrasting. And I think you're taking it to a performative aspect as well, once they've found the to or not to be.
and go to the Drunken Shakespeare and just do and one of the acting companies is designated as the drunken actor. And they start giving shots or
Put it into a college context.
And so during the performance, whoever that person is gets incredibly drunk and does all sorts of creative things that don't make any sense at all because he's drunk with Midsummer Night's Dream, and the others improvise around it. And so I said, you know, they could do a virtual or a Drunken Shakespeare performance in a classroom by designating one person not to be the drunken person, but not actually drink, just
Yeah.
play, act out.
And to me, that's far more interesting if they've seen 3 different cups from whom they've drawn before they decide how to be the drummer.
It is a really interesting thing, but then this actually gets into how you build on models and kind of gets away from this idea of creating and why is it playing and you realize that this is building how you're building it down.
After 40 years of teaching, I've figured out how to get my students
Scholars right now, we don't
practice on identifying
look at program
because they are convinced that in order to do that section, they have to memorize.
Right.
Yeah.
So that they'll instantly recognize
Which is just the opposite of what you want.
by giving them to be or not to be. Something that in class is said over and over and over again.
So are we trying to scaffold things so that they improve their proficiency using technology? What are we?
You're scaffolding so that they can, I think the original assignment I gave you was problem solving. So whatever problem solving is in your discipline, you're scaffolding whatever your discipline is.
Oh, so
The technology is a tool, but now I do want them to partner with technology throughout. But your learning goal is whatever your learning goal is. But they need to practice using technology around that discipline as well.
Who would say that? Exactly. Yeah. Here's what I worry about. That they haven't been asked to think that way before you've done something. And to me it gets at how do we departmentally and institutionally ensure that students are thinking and not just memorizing. Now, is that in Shakespeare? Okay. But you're talking about mostly English majors who aren't taking their first course. Okay? So they should be coming in with more advanced character analysis. But unless, if they've been coming in with the memorization mode turned on, they have to psych themselves out. Right. I'm trying to remember, my first exposure to mathematics was Bess Michael in American Lit. I had the Norton Anthology, and I was scared out of my mind. Maybe this being an English major isn't for me, because I can't know, but it didn't take me long, because in high school it wasn't memorizing school. But it didn't take me long to catch on that it wasn't memorizing. It was only one person, one word, who could have said that. It all went back to technique.
And I was doing something else with experience. I was trying to figure out how to unstructured problem. What to me is let's go right now.
All right, well, that's something. Yeah. I think we have one site or journey. So that a lot of information
as well as and they would have
so project
So I read it as one part of it. And it was from all of that. And it would be from surveys and it could be anything from an experience
See, and I just love because what you articulate to me is what she's trying to get us at. Because it's not the right answer per se. It's the mode of inquiry and it's the process that we go through. And I
I'm driving it. It wasn't Oh my God! And so my road membership is my favorite. It wasn't. I have to go back and
but what I have always, okay, I love you to death. But even before I did, I loved your intellectual curiosity and the way that you were always thinking, analyzing it, and maybe that's why we love teaching as learning, because we enjoy that intellectual process. But okay, we both have those students that are not playing, they're not interested in the puzzle. It's just tell me how to put the pieces together.
And you might have them.
Enjoy running it.
So you get sort of set and you assign something, and part of the
I spend more and more time with you and less and less doing the things I don't enjoy. Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
That is very useful. Because you're not necessarily
you really want to structure it.
you're quantifying.
Yeah, we need to in a low tech way. Because this is going to be
And so out of that, our secretaries collecting on right. These are all and what you were
is when it's used well, how it extends the print, which goes back to my love of theater. I love the script, and I love the choices that have been made, the interpretation. But that's the question that we really have is, okay, I have all I can do in first year seminar, helping them to think deeply, and getting them to communicate and adding the teaching of digital tools. So I really don't. I really just play with the digital tools, letting them do whatever the hell they want with them. But that's, I'm just, and what I'm really trying to do is getting them to think more deeply about ideas. So I give them all kinds of things they But to get them to read more deeply, and all of a sudden they don't read so much. Oh, did you? Well, except, help me. It's still a draft. Uh-oh. Oh, no.
But I mean,
And maybe that's why it won't be accepted, because it's a college professor. It's funny. I used to write an English journal, but I thought maybe I should take one of them.
We share it and probably. Oh, no, it was for our home. And that's kind of what they do. But I mean, they don't. And now,
All roads, there are goals.
We need some way.
If they don't have clear goals,
That's the whole purpose of our website.
that means some of them identify as already sorting it together. And then, oh, I'm actually ready to come back to class, right? And then what is the, and I can
If they're willing to accept it, then maybe one of the things I can do to revise it is even to talk about my own admission. I can't consciously think about all of these all the time.
Your bob's already gone.
Yeah. But if I can give you greater permission, Yes.
okay, that's actually one of my outcomes.
But the reader needs to be given permission.
each group builds a timeline.
No. It's all print. It's still, yeah. Click whatever you want. Yeah. Right.
Here they are.
We go wherever. Start there. No. It'll be multimodal. Yeah. And the other thing that would have, right. Yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing that makes me crazy about classifications that allow us to look at, because they're all overlapping. And for me, there are such overlaps between Freudian dialogics and Rosenblattian transactions that I don't care which category you put them under, it's really talking about meaning that's made in conversation as opposed to transmission. Cynical about love already. Because she should be. Off night.
So I said, what's the theme? and then they really did. I couldn't do it, so I did it for them. I did a little bit.
Okay, are we ready to share?
One thing of doing this is that you have realized where the
Yes, no, maybe, yes.
and now I realize
I said share. Okay. So no matter what you have, it's okay, because this is just a workshop. This is just like the beginning of a conversation. So, and I know we only have about 15 minutes left until lunch, and I'm hungry, so we'll finish it here. I haven't come in one time. So. Can we have some volunteers to share? And is it in the Google folder? Because then I can go to it. So let's hear what you came up with. Again, keeping in mind that one of my learning goals for this workshop was, as this group over here said, we had a really good conversation. One of my goals is that you have build community around this. And I know one of the best ways to build community is to do something together. So that's really what's going. I'm not expecting perfect answers, but I'm expecting that you've sort of engaged in it. So who wants to start, or should I pick up people?
I want to start.
Okay.
You totally ignored your assignment.
It's an experience I often have. I'm sure you've had the same one. So do you have something to show that I should navigate to, or you just want to talk?
No, we just talked.
Okay.
But what I wanted to say was what we talked about was digital stuff. But we didn't start out talking that way. First we ignored your assignment, and then I said, Joe, I loved your article. And he says, oh, it's just in draft form. And this is for English Journal. And I said, yeah. I said, I know you're still working on it, but it's great. They're great ideas. But it was so overwhelming. You had 10 different things in it. And it was just too much. And he got all upset about that. Like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, blah, 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 blah. You know, no, they're not going to accept it. Nobody's going to read it. And I said, is it online? Because the way you should do it is start in the middle and have, this article talks about 10 different things I was trying to do with this course. And I know that you're not all going to sequentially go through the 10 things, but one or two of the 10 might be interesting to you. So here's the list. Click on the one or the two that you're interested in. And I said, so your article won't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which is the way it's going now, and I was totally overwhelmed. And I even participated in the course, and I was overwhelmed as he talked about these 10 things. I said, all that was going on, oh, my head hurts. And I said, it'll be that you go to the middle and you immediately click on the things you're most interested in, and you go out that way to 2 things, and the 2 things have links in them that go to some of the other things. So that's what we talked about.
We didn't really ignore your assignment, but I think what we're trying to articulate is that the very nature of a workshop can take you right into the technology and can be and is overwhelming.
Yeah.
So how can you let go of all of that and get back to what is it that we learn from colleagues that matters so much, and how can we create meaningful, exciting ways for young people to engage in that conversation socially? And invariably, that's going to take us back to some technological tools.
And I think that's a really interesting question, because it really gets at you modeling the way you learn and engaging your students in it, and even sometimes saying, it's okay if you don't read and ingest and love everything. There may be one thing you're going to get out of that.
But now I know she totally hits my article, I gotta start again.
Okay, right here.
Split it into 10 articles.
That's right.
Well, one of the things, we started talking very much vertically in our curriculum, as you said, but what we realized is what we have questions about is how to take these tools to do kind of horizontal scaffolding across. We're in the sciences, so there's a lot of prerequisites. How do we know that some of the statistics or math functions, you know, that the students are learning, and the interaction, to see how they're applied in the sciences. So it's more of a this way.
It's the transfer horizontally, right.
And how could we use technology to help us? And I don't have the answer, but that's the
I
conversation.
was really hoping you had the answer. But I think part of it is having the conversation.
But we did talk about the idea of sharing, like maybe having peer reviews, somebody doing Gen Chem lab reports, peer reviewing somebody doing first year bio lab reports, and looking at what are the common elements, even though the content differs, but what is the same for really good reports.
We've been having these conversations on campus. Again, I think I mentioned we're doing a general education revision, and we had a series of conversations about our university essential learning outcomes, and actually last spring, we had a series of conversations focused on 21st century literacies, and the outcome of every one of those conversations was, A, we need to talk to each other across the institution, B, we need to come up with a common language for how we're talking about these things, and then C, so that we can help our students understand. Because like when we had this discussion about what was the essential learning outcome I gave you in the first exercise, which was creative, collaborative, and critical thinking to solve problems, that is one of our ULOs, by the way. We had all these disciplines like math and graphic design, and they were saying, well, we approach problem solving. The problem we have with our students is they don't know how to transfer it from here and apply it over here. And so I think those horizontal conversations are really good, because if we're aware of them, then the next step is helping our students be aware of that. We know that you took this math class and you learned this. Now let's talk about how that technique applies over here. And so it's kind of just being aware of what else is going on. And that has nothing to do with technology.
Yeah, but can you use technology to help that trade?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think you have. Okay, right here.
I work with Carol Turner-Carr, both of us historians. I have a bit of an advantage in the sense that I'm in charge of all the music history curriculum. I mean, so I get it from beginning to end, and I want to make like not a lot of communication worries. But what we talked about was I'm very interested in opera and different, understanding different opera productions, which are very different. So you know, when you go to Germany, especially, and you think you're going to see Candide in English, and how straightforward can that be? Well, it's set in a bathtub.
Good acoustics.
But I was gonna imagine
So they are considered like they're the most edgy. I mean, they are the Christopher Shores of, you know, sorry, our director. I mean, and then there's those people who are really, really conservative and historically informed, you know, hip, historically informed performances, and so there's a big variety. And so what happens is that in terms of the scaffolding, when the students first have music 1750, I have them just doing basic reading as a play, acting out in English, the translation, then we listen to the opera. By the end of that semester, we watched 3 different productions of Julius Caesar, but that's because there's a countertenor, a male, and a female all playing the role of Julius Caesar in the different productions. And we're focusing then on performance practice. But then when they get to classical romantic, we also again start exploring these different productions, and so we were struggling with the unstructured part, and so we thought the end piece could be just to think about a concept paper, and you also suggested maybe I could go to that Mindscape. Minecraft, sorry.
Minecraft opera, come on.
Minecraft.
I can see the mashup coming down.
I don't have a 10-year-old. And we can
I bet there's Minecraft opera. Somebody go.
But then I did think of a concept paper to take a different opera that we haven't talked about and design their own production. Where is it going to be set? So it's, instead of being in the 16th century Duke Palace, are you in 1960s, you know, Las Vegas, which has been done, or are you in the Minecraft world? Yeah. So I mean, so that's kind of where I'm thinking. And there's that's no right. No. Oh, it does exist.
Minecraft opera. Yeah, I was sure that there was. There are so many. There's so much pop culture.
Wow. Okay. So
I bet somebody has done Ring Cycle. I guarantee.
Well, I went to the. It turns out a close friend is a singer. Was in the last Ring Cycle, and it was set in. They did the entire thing in Bayreuth in in the 1989 between the fall of the West and East Berlin. So Ring Cycle is actually now based, they did the whole thing as if it was based in Berlin at the time of the fall of the wall. So it's, so there's incredibly
and I think,
wonderful things.
This kind of assignment, and I was talking with Brian earlier, he does a thing where he had his students do Chaucer over Twitter. That kind of remediation is really asking them to do transfer, right? And this is one of the things we expect students to get out of liberal education, to take the skills they developed in one area and transfer and apply them somewhere else. And that's the skills we need. I mean, this is what has enabled me to do technology based on my PhD in classical studies. I've figured out a way to help me transfer and apply. And assignments like this that say, do it in another media, or do it in a different type of genre. That's, a very good unstructured problem because it helps them sort of think out what are the essentials, what would I keep, what would I throw away, and what does this environment make me change? So I think that makes a lot of sense. And giving them lots of practice transferring is really helpful.
How much do you worry, though, about losing the nuance, the richness, the multiplicity? From Chaucer to Twitter?
Yeah.
Boy, I would be really concerned about just a kind of dumbing down and a sort of flattening.
I think that's where you have a conversation about it. You don't just do it, you reflect on it. And that's one of the most important pieces. And the other thing is, don't just do once, do multiple media. And then taken together, you get the complexity. And I think you still look at the original. But these are some conversations you should be having. So this Paradata paper in the Minecraft history, they have to sort of think about what were the decisions I was making. And I think what's also really important is, frankly, I would want them to see what's dumbed down.
Well, but that's also part of the problem is because they're used to using so much of this technology in ways that are really not very thoughtful, right? So that's what we're always working against.
Yeah.
Is trying to encourage them to develop those kinds of skills in a medium that they're already used to working in ways that are sort of anti-intellectual.
And this is where you have to push them to be intellectual, and I think this is where you will encounter resistance, right? You often hear the thing of, I should teach in Facebook, because all my students are in Facebook, and then they don't want to be in Facebook. They don't want to do this kind of work, just like they don't want to read deeply, they don't want to write deeply, think critically, and this is one of your challenges, is figuring out how to do it.
And also, I think not to expect that the technology is going to solve the problem for you. Because for the Twitter thing and your nuance thing, what I find with my students is that they only see trees, they never see forests. And they don't, you ask them to summarize something and they start to give every single detail kind of thing. And so I thought, well, Twitter is going to help me on this. So I gave them working in groups, they each had a monologue from a soliloquy from Hamlet. And they were supposed to put it into a tweet. And I thought, this is going to help them to see what the main idea of that soliloquy is. And all they did was go, detailed tree, and then when they got to the maximum number of characters, they stopped. They still, the technology didn't help them solve their problem.
Yeah. No, I think you're dead right about that. Yes, Erin.
But I was going to say, I think sometimes, we're talking about getting them to transfer and transform something between different media and try to understand it, and maybe they struggle with that. We can also show them how other people do it. A lot of contemporary Latin American literature, Latin American public intellectuals use social media, use the internet. It's a way to reach a lot of people. So we might read a short story and an essay and a series of blog posts and read the Twitter feed by a current public intellectual in Latin America who's writing about things that we're talking about, and they get to see how someone is using a variety of media to talk about something in a very rich, specific, nuanced way, including through Twitter. But what do they have to do that? How do they transform it? How does Joanny Sanchez narrate, essentially be a journalist through Twitter? What is that add? What does it take away from? How does this change the message? How does the timing of it change your reading of it? And so I actually feel like that leads to a lot better conversations with the students about what it means to communicate through these different media and how people read things differently and what their expectations are. And then when they go and do something, they're a lot more conscious of it because they've already experienced it from the user end, which they're a little more familiar with.
Yeah. This reminds me of, I am going to go ahead and do this now. I have, this is a little list I put together last year, the top 10 misunderstandings about designing blended learning experiences, because I think you guys kind of hit some of them. My students want as much time for the class as I do. Yeah, chance. My students want to friend me on Facebook. Maybe. My students, and I mentioned this earlier, they understand the value of liberal education. They care about what digital humanities means. This was a great one. I had all these friends who taught Introduction to Digital Humanities classes. Let's read all these theory. And they were like, they're tech savvy, so they'll love my technology assignment. Let's see. They see the connection between work in the face-to-face classroom and work outside of class. No, not necessarily. Even when you tell them explicitly more than once, 7 times I think might be it. They understand the term flipping the classroom and love this idea. Essentially, we're saying, yes, they want to do more work outside of class. Yeah, sure they do. They want to try something new. No, they're really comfortable learning in the old ways. Something new may not be engaging. Oh yeah, here was, they want to spend more time working on class material outside of class. No, they don't. They want to do it all in class so they can spend more time on other stuff. And finally, my number 1 misunderstanding was that X, you can fill in this blank, is a magic bullet that's going to make my class the best ever. So that's my top 10 misunderstandings, but I think you kind of like need to go in understanding what we're asking you to do is really hard. Good luck. But I think if you work together and talk to each other, you can be mutually supportive. If you go in understanding it's going to be a challenge, and where some of those pitfalls are, you'll be in better shape. We're at 12, but are there other people that want to share? Right here?
We actually put our power.
Oh, great. Yeah, I want to see this. Hold on.
There's always one in every class.
That's right. That's a good
Historians, what can you say?
So which one is it?
It's the only one probably that's there.
No, I think there's 2 others up there.
There's
Tech
Spanish.
workshop historians. Keep going down.
Okay.
You were going the right direction. There, your arrow is almost
Oh, there
on
it is. Okay. Go for it. Let me pop it up. Okay.
So this was a challenge for me since I didn't really know what the curriculum was. So we were talking about that, and we spent a lot of time talking about the curriculum, and then we talked about how historians think about their job and teaching students how to be historians. So we started with asking the historical questions, and we put this in the context of a course on modern revolutions, and in particular we were thinking about having students look at what happened in 2011, the Arab Spring, right, the revolution in Syria, or the revolution in Libya and Tunisia and Egypt in particular. And so that would be the sort of the context of the class, the revolutions. And the first thing that we would do in class was begin to ask, what are the historical questions? What is the historical questions? And we came up with the one, why do revolutions occur? And then we would create a kind of a set of definitions there in class together, sort of in this collaborative way. So thinking about it, what's a necessary part of a revolution? And then we would assign groups of students particular revolutions. And then they would go out and they would do the next thing that historians have to do, which is sort of collect the data. What's out there? What are the primary sources? What are the secondary sources? That particular set of revolutions offers access to a lot of really interesting stuff, Twitter feeds, for example.
I know for the Arab Spring, people know.
Yeah, the whole media thing in the Arab Spring is, it's like rich data for them. So they would pull together some of those sources as a group outside of class, and it would demand access to technology.
Yeah.
Then they would bring it back, and they would come back together, and we would be in class, and we would evaluate those resources, we would evaluate that data, we would look at them in terms of the question we asked. Does this help us answer the question? Does it raise another question that we need to ask? And so we would be doing collaboration and problem solving there. Then we send them back out of class and we chose Timeline on NITLE. Are you familiar with that? It's a pretty nice resource for creating historical chronologies. And so obviously we have to think about things in terms of causality and chronology and what came first and what led to what. And so they would use the technology and critical thinking skills, and each group would create a chronology for their revolution. We're running out of time now, and we were really going fast. So they would return to class, they would share, refine, they would identify patterns, they would reconsider the definition, and we saw this as an opportunity. We also saw this as a 300-level course, basically, of reflection, synthesis, and communication.
So then what's interesting is, in order to get them to the point where they can do that at the 300 level, what do you need to be doing at the 100 level?
Right, we talked about that too, and so that is primary source analysis.
Yeah.
Right, so that's sort of the first thing that you have to do is understand what a primary source is and how do you analyze that.
Yeah, yeah.
So we did a class and not a...
Yeah, but again, you did a little bit of talking around it, and what I can imagine is doing some of that social annotation for primary source analysis is a great way to sort of start to scaffold that early on.
And then in the second year, it's more historiography and secondary source analysis. So that this is building on both of those.
And I have a friend who does History Engine with her students to do some of the primary source analysis and start to write it and then build out.
He does History what? History Ninja?
History Ninja. Gosh, that sounds like fun, doesn't it? No. History Engine.
Ninja would be more fun. Yeah.
Ninja would be much more fun. Somebody should invent that. You should assign that to your students.
Yeah, I know.
History Ninja. I want it.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have something to share?
I think both English and Spanish had one, but I also don't want to take people away from lunch. We posted our slide. It's pretty... We started trying to get into the details of these actual assignments and realized that if we were going to talk about how we were going to do this at the 100, 200, and 300 level, we couldn't really stick that all in one slide. So...
yeah, I know. It's kind of an artificial constraint there.
So it's still very little. You probably can't read it. But what we were talking about is that for us, if we're even just looking at Latin American studies and looking at Latin American literature, inevitably, no matter, even at the end, even when you go through grad school, you've not seen everything, not even close, right? You just get a sense of how little you actually know. And one of the things we find our students sometimes, even when they've gone all the way through and they're at their senior year, they come up against a text that they've never seen before, that's unfamiliar, and they go, well, I need an introduction to this. Well, if you're not going to give me an introduction, how do I know how to read this? Yeah. And so something we've been trying to work in is that ability to figure out how to approach an unknown text, no matter what it is. And so we thought about, well, how do you, our learning outcome then for that would be to teach students how to learn to build just a basic contextual framework necessary to interpret or to start to interpret an unknown text, an unfamiliar to them text. Things like identifying what it might be significant or insignificant details and what they can extrapolate from that, how they can connect it to existing knowledge. Can they identify the gaps that they have and what do they need to go find out? Mm-hmm. And we gave the example that I'm working with right now. They're reading fragments of José Martí's Nuestra América from 1891 and they know he's Cuban. They should be able to at least figure out a couple basic things. Mm-hmm. But I have to point out, well, okay, 1891, Cuba. Tell me about this a little bit. What's the situation? He's talking about independence. Why? Who else is independent? Who's not? Mm-hmm. Starting to build some of those things. Where is he writing from? He's writing from New York City. Why is he in New York City? They might not make that initial jump themselves. So we talked about what we would do at the 100 level, giving things like giving them a context in a particular text, and it's a delimited circumstance. They're also working in not their first language for the most part. And have them make those connections, but you've already limited the number of things they have to connect. At the 200 level, they already have some existing context, but they're given an unknown text with some very minimal information and then work collectively in various formats to identify, well, with what you have, what can you identify that's significant? How can you connect that to known knowledge? What other questions are you going to need to find out the answers to before you can go further? We talked about having each student or group responsible for developing an aspect of that context and then who knows what format that would take, but it would be collectively accessible. I was stealing the idea of a peer review process, because that's sort of one of the pieces that I've been missing, that I've been looking for, to vet that, right? To vet how they're building that context, both the process and the result. Then do some sort of social or participatory close reading, have discussion in class, and then it breaks out again where they're doing some individual interpretive work. Now they've got the text, they've got this collectively constructed and vetted context. Now what can they do with it to go further? That starts to build some of the literary analysis skills that we'll be using at the 300 level. And at the 300 level, all of our students are doing independent research projects, and this is inevitably one element of that.
Reminds me, someone who was over here was doing a thing where he was having his students collectively write the introduction to an empirical paper. It reminded me of what you were doing, collectively figuring out the background so then you can do it on your own later.
So that was our, like, 30,000.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
I think English has something.
English
right?
has
Just
something.
show it, it's pretty simple.
Okay.
And I would just say in brief, I think we have a lot of common ground with you folks and what Erica just articulated in terms of that journey from collaborative, close reading praxis into individual argumentation.
Nice. See, English department, follow directions.
Get into it here, isn't it? Almost.
Okay, somebody talk us through it real quick.
I can't read that far.
I've got my reading glasses if you.
Community
annotation,
discussion,
yeah.
problematic passages, identifying links, cultural references, and construct meaning, independent application of concepts, and summary project.
Yeah.
That's it.
Nicole just said it really.
Yeah. I mean, the notion is really building upon the outcomes we think of in terms of close reading practice, and for some of us that means historicizing texts in similar ways. But for a lot of us, it's that close reading moment of evaluation and working with original documentation and how we get, I guess, an awareness of contemporary methodologies, even if we're dealing with medieval textuality. So that's a part of it for us, is thinking through the kind of hegemony of periodization and technology as a tool to help us do that. And I think it not only connects us to our departmental outcomes, but is really a good friend in terms of assessment conversations we're having right now as our own discourse community. So this is really helping us to continue that type of work as well.
Yeah, it occurs to me, one of the things that came out of our campus discussion about problem solving was that part of it was figuring out how to define the problem.
Right.
And that was something I heard with several of these, like coming to something unfamiliar, unstructured, that's part of your issue, is figuring out how to put a structure on it, and then how to attack that. And that's what you're doing. Disciplines give you structures that you can transfer and apply in other areas.
One of the things I liked about having to sit when we sat down and did it this way is it also, I think, can serve to help students see that drawing on what often gets labeled as theory, these big ideas, complex ideas, and pulling those in as interpretive contexts isn't really all that different from what they're more familiar with, is like looking up what happened in 1895 or 1898. Those interpretive contexts are just as important and just as relevant, and it's the same sort of process. And I think it might help demystify that a little bit for them.
Yeah, and I think that's the common ground for all of us, table by table, is the notion that we value critical thinking, which is to ask difficult questions rather than seek easy answers, which is the, I can look up a date, but rather how do you ask that, historical or linguistic question, which is the pre-professionalization register as well as the intellectual.
Well, hey, thanks all of you very much. I've learned a lot, so I'll be taking examples back to my campus, so thank you very much. Enjoyed it. And again, I'll put my slides in this folder, and there was a references page. I'm going to add a list of references there as well. And the slides I did this morning, I'll also put in the folder and link from my blog as well. But thank you very much, and give yourselves a hand. So, good work.